Okay, hi guys. Welcome to the SILA Foundation July webinar. I'm Cindy Davidson from ExamFX, and I'll be your host today, or something. So I'm kind of giving everyone a minute to get logged on and ready. We are so excited today to be talking about insurance professionals. Who are they and what do they do? Our webinar presenter today will be Rosalie Donlon, who is Editor-in-Chief for the National Underwriter Property and Casualty magazine and also PC360.com. If you aren't already receiving the PC360 Daily News, you need to get subscribed to that and especially check out Rosalie's article from July 1st, which is how to help young insurance professionals grow their careers. Rosalie is going to be bringing about 20 years of industry and publishing experience writing about this crazy industry we're part of. And really, when you think about it, members of the public, if they think about who works in the industry at all, well, they probably don't, but if they do, they primarily are thinking of their agent or broker because those are the insurance professionals most consumers come in contact with and work with directly. But the truth of the matter is that insurance is an engine of the economy in ways that very few people understand. According to the Insurance Information Institute, insurance companies contribute about $600 billion to the GDP every year, and they employ about 2.7 million workers. So today, Rosalie's going to help us understand, what exactly are the careers that exist in the insurance world. She's uniquely qualified to do this since her company, ALM, recently launched the ALM Young Professionals Network on LinkedIn, and maybe she'll have a minute to tell us about that. But thank you, Rosalie, for being with us today. I'm sure we're all excited to learn a little more about insurance professionals. Who are they and what do they do?
Thanks so much, Cindy. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you could join us today for this. Insurance professionals are more than the classic life insurance sales professionals we've seen in old movies. And the image of somebody knocking on your door to sell you life insurance is long gone. Now they may be knocking on your email inbox instead. But there's an old saying that nothing happens without insurance, which makes the insurance industry actually an incubator for innovation. If you think about autonomous vehicles, we wouldn't be as far in the development stage as we are without somebody underwriting the potential insurance liability there. So I'm going to give you a broad view of who the insurance industry is in 2019 and what possible job opportunities there might be if you haven't considered them so far. So first of all, it's a diverse industry with 5 generations in the workforce, and it represents the country as a whole. So it's a great place for someone who is mid-career as well as people who are just starting out. And it's also a great place for returning veterans or for people who just haven't thought about it as a career at all. And here are the job categories I came up with from A to Z. These are only 20, there are more. If you think about large insurance carriers or brokers or even large insurance agencies, in addition to the traditional corporate roles of receptionist, finance professionals, there are these 20 categories that I've pulled out that are focused specifically on insurance. And we're going to start with everybody's favorite, the actuary. Now, for those of you who are not math phobic, which is me, not me, actuary, you will be happy to know, is one of the most sought after college majors. Actuaries are the people who crunch the numbers for insurance carriers to figure out risk. Most often we hear about them in the financial services arena, in the life insurance arena, where they're calculating life expectancies and how to price life insurance for somebody who's going to live to 70, 80, 90. In the property and casualty world, they're pricing risk for insurance companies based on what's the likelihood of sustaining a loss in this geographic area, in this kind of business, in this size building, in this size population. This definition is from the Casualty Actuarial Society. And as I said, it's currently the most valuable college major. You don't need an advanced degree, although, as with everything else, eventually it helps. And designations help too. CAS has several designations for people. But the average annual salary is over $100,000 a year, which is understandable because there aren't a lot of people who want to do this. So I would suggest that, as I said, if you do like math, this is kind of a great place to be. You get to play with statistics, you get to play with the odds. You get to look at emerging risks, you get to look at traditional risks, and whether there have been changes in how those risks are evolving. For example, flooding. With climate change, with erosion, with the changing weather patterns, flood risk is a huge, changing drastically. And actuaries are very involved in helping to assess those new risks for companies. And then we have our favorite, which most people are aware of, as Cindy said, agents. Depending on how old you are, you may or may not have interacted personally with an agent. And agents come in two flavors, either independent or captive. And the independent agents are the ones who can sell you coverage from carriers that they're licensed to do business with, that they have contracts with. Captive agents work solely for one particular carrier. Think State Farm or Allstate. Those are generally the traditional carriers, captive agents. Again, no advanced degree needed, but they must be licensed. And we're hearing a lot about disruption with the distribution channel of independent agents. And it is being disrupted. It is changing nationwide. For example, as a company had only captive agents, and through 2020, it's moving to an independent agent model. And in some cases, the carriers are selling direct and they're becoming your competitors. But at certain life stages, people still want that trusted advisor. And that's really how you need to think of independent agents, as the trusted advisor that you go to when you have a life event. For example, you've just bought your first home, or you've just moved out of your parents' home and into an apartment. You bought your first car, and you're not on your parents' policy anymore. You got married and you've now got possessions to insure. That's when the independent agent can help you figure out best coverage for you. Also, as a result of the recession of 2008, many former employees became consultants or started small businesses, but they still think like individuals. So the independent agent there, as a trusted advisor, can help those small businesses figure out what coverage they need. If you're running the business out of your home, what kind of zoning do you need to comply with? What kind of special coverage might you need? Do you see clients at your home? Do you need to worry about whether there's a slip and fall risk for them coming in and out, or whether your dog will love them to death? Those kinds of issues. So agents can be a really great source. And it's a great way to build community. Think about all the Little League team sponsors that are your neighbors and friends. Insurance brokers are sort of a variation of insurance agents, but they generally represent commercial businesses, and most often mid-sized to large businesses. They act as the intermediary between the client and the carrier, similar to independent agents, or yes, independent agents, sorry, it's that kind of day. But they're more focused on the commercial risks and the potential commercial liability. So one of the stories we did on Property Casualty 360 was about the growing number of craft breweries. And we talked to brokers about how they would place those businesses and the various kinds of insurance coverage just one business would need. For example, if you're running a brewery, you have food and drug laws to comply with, you have product liability claims, you have workers, so you have workers' comp, you are in a building, so you need some kind of property liability insurance. If you have a tasting room, what kind of potential liability is there just from customers coming through the door? You're likely to have to comply with dram shop regulations, so you need that kind of coverage. It's another great way to help people and to think about how you can best suit their needs and how you can help the business grow, especially if it starts out small and grows to be, Sam Adams Brewery, for example, that started in somebody's garage and went large, went national. Again, you'll see on the slides the average annual salary for brokers. All of that, of course, varies based on commission structure and size of the broker. And brokers can be small, 10 employees on up to companies like Marsh or A.J. Gallagher, who are global in scope and looking to get bigger. Claims adjusters are probably the insurance professionals most people encounter, and they can make or break your relationship with your carrier, because they're the people who come along when you've had a loss and you're not happy anyway. So ideally, it's nothing more than a minor car accident that the adjuster will help you with. But in some cases, if there's a natural disaster, if you think about the wildfires in California last year, where people were devastated and lost everything, the adjusters, among the first representatives of their insurance carrier that they run into, and how the claim adjuster reacts has a lot to do with how the policyholder then feels about the carrier. It's an interesting job. There's probably, if you watch the farmers commercials, the adjuster who has to worry about the moose on the swing, I think has an interesting job. You can either be a public adjuster, which means you're independent and you're contracted with carriers, or a private adjuster who works solely for the carrier. I know in my hometown there are a couple of offices kind of attached to the local garage that has a sign that says Geico or Allstate or Nationwide. And if you have a claim of some kind, usually a car accident, you drive your car there and the adjuster comes out and looks at your car and takes care of you. If you're with a different carrier, the claims adjuster comes out to you. If you have a property loss, usually the adjusters come out to you too and can be from anywhere nationwide. During Superstorm Sandy or any other large catastrophe, adjusters travel often to last year they were in Houston from as far away as South Dakota. The public adjusters are also independent, but they represent the policyholder, not the carrier. And some people who have suffered a catastrophic loss find the public adjusters can get them a better settlement. So I know I have a friend who had a fire in her house who went the public adjuster route, and the advantage there was that that person was able to fight some battles for her that, as a result of having a devastating fire and losing her home, she wasn't up to fighting. Private adjusters and public adjusters have a certain amount of tension going on, but it's another option and certainly can be well paid. Communications professionals. If you like to write and you like to tell stories, then insurance companies are looking for you. If you think about all the stuff you get in the mail for insurance companies, a communications professional wrote all those. The marketing materials have to be carefully crafted because the insurance industry is regulated. If you're doing business just in the US, you have 52 jurisdictions to worry about, 50 states plus the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. So in addition to crafting the message in a way to make your company stand out, you have to make sure you're complying with all of the rules and regulations. You also have, if the company is publicly traded, you have some securities laws that you have to worry about. And the communications can be speeches for executives, can be internal communications to employees, can be external press releases, special reports, investor materials. But you get to tell the story of what the insurance company can do for you and help explain that the insurance industry is not the bad guys, as much as to get that reputation. Salaries range. Average annual salary is $47,000 a year, and it's a great launching pad. As a media professional, I get a lot of press releases, and I have a lot of contacts of communications professionals within the industry who find their jobs interesting because, in addition to actually writing the documents to go out to the public, they're managing social media accounts, they're interacting with the public in a way that they didn't expect to. Compliance professionals are really important to the insurance industry. Again, because it's a regulated industry, it has to meet licensing requirements and rules and regulations in 52 jurisdictions, plus federal under the SEC. The compliance professionals help manage any rules, regulations, or legal issues within the organization, kind of act as intermediaries usually between the front lines and the lawyers. And you don't have to necessarily be a lawyer to deal with these, but you do have to be somewhat of a regulatory nerd who loves digging into the nuances of regulations and legislation. And you have to stay on top of this kind of information, which can really tear your hair out some days, especially with Congress right now talking about whether or not we should keep the federal insurance office. What's the status of the National Flood Insurance Program this week? What's the status of the Terrorism Insurance Program this week? So it's a challenge, but it's an interesting and dynamic way to be involved in the insurance industry and to know that what you do really has an impact on your company. You can, earn a designation as an associate for insurance company compliance. And I haven't talked about designation so far, but that's one of the pluses of the insurance industry is that continuing education is really important, and most carriers, most insurance companies are invested in helping you stay up to date with the latest information. So designations are a good way to do that, and they help you maintain your knowledge base and networking to help you do whatever job it is you have within your company do better. Customer service representatives are also among the most important people within the insurance industry. If you just have a normal question, or even if you're filing a claim, this is probably the first person you encounter when you call your carrier. And how the customer service representative reacts can tell you everything about the ongoing relationship with the insurance company. And as insurance becomes more of a commodity, the differentiator is customer service. So this is the frontline person. And if you're not sure whether you have the skills for this job, one industry executive I know says that she looks to non-insurance industry people to see how well they handle customer service. Her favorite group to recruit from is wait staff in restaurants, especially high-end restaurants. Because if they can handle people who are getting cranky about their food, they can handle people who are having difficulty when they've had a loss. Her other great source is people in retail, because you're faced with the customer all the time, and your job is to keep them calm and meet their needs in a non-confrontational way. So if you're doing something in one of those industries and you think you'd like a change, being a customer service representative is a good way to go. And if you speak another language, you're even more valuable as a customer service representative, as we have a great number of people for whom English is not necessarily their first language, and they understand insurance concepts to a certain degree, but the nuances are not as well explained to them in English as it might be in their native language. So that's another plus. Cybersecurity and data privacy professionals are in great demand. I'm sure we've all read about the data breaches. We've all heard the not if, but when. And there are some statistics that say there are approximately 50,000 potential data breaches a day nationwide. That means a hacker has tried to ping a company and may or may not have gotten through, or you might have had a major breach where, as Yahoo found, all of its email accounts were compromised. For an insurance industry professional, cybersecurity means you have to keep your company's internal records safe, but also your customers' data safe. So it's an interesting challenge. And if you're a major carrier that's been around for more than 100 years, like the Hartford or Travelers, the sheer volume of data you have to manage requires a lot of cybersecurity professionals. Data privacy professionals also include, to some extent, ethical hackers, who are the people whose job it is to just test internal systems to see where the vulnerabilities are and to figure out ways to patch those. There are also organizations that have certifications for cybersecurity and data privacy professionals as well. And it's a well-paid job. And it's something that you do need computer skills for, but you also need problem-solving skills and being able to think outside the box. Oh, I would also add, before we move back on this, cybersecurity and data privacy is now becoming even more significant with the Internet of Things. Think Alexa, and your Apple Watch that talks to your iPhone. There are vulnerabilities all along the way on those, and within an insurance company, you're trying to keep your clients safe when they have a connected home that connects to their car. So trying to avoid those vulnerabilities is another significant aspect of being a cybersecurity or privacy professional within an insurance company. Data is king. Data analysts and data scientists are even more important than ever. When you think about the sheer volume of data that comes in through everybody's computer, I mean, just your own, when you look at the hundreds of emails you may get a day, or the sheer amount of stories you see on the internet, the volume, just volume and volumes and volumes. Somebody has to manage all that, and somebody has to sift through the noise and figure out what's relevant and what's not. So data scientists and data analysts gather the data and translate the numbers into English so that when you're dealing with the stakeholders in an organization who don't have a computer or IT background, you're explaining what data is important, why it's important, and why that shifts, that today this bucket of data is critical, tomorrow it may be something else. The data scientists then take that data that the data analyst has come up with and actually mine it for trends and looking for the nuggets of what can be done with the data to take it to the next step, to develop new products, to minimize the risk for clients, and so forth. Data scientists are particularly useful in helping underwriters assess risk, especially when they're trying to create a program for an industry that they're going to insure. If you have a client that has a chain of dry cleaning stores or car washes or movie theaters, the data scientists can help set up the algorithms to sift through the commonalities, the risks, the pricing, and figure out how best to underwrite either an individual business or a group of businesses. Once upon a time, somebody would sit down with a bunch of files for 10 car washes, but now the data can do it for you quickly, but the data analysts and the data scientists are there to make sure that what you get is relevant and not just what I call noise. Engineers. If you're a carrier that primarily insures commercial businesses and you need to know whether a building was built correctly or a bridge is built soundly, or it's a pharmaceutical company or a chemical company, it's hard to teach an insurance professional the underlying engineering. It's easier to teach an engineer about insurance. They instinctively understand structural stress when you're putting up a warehouse, whether something needs to be built to hurricane standards, whether it needs to withstand hail, is this the best roofing material to use in this situation, to minimize the risk of loss to the client. And you sometimes need to help engineers with the softer side of explaining stuff, in a not too technical manner, but several of the carrier executives we talk to believe that engineers are really important for commercial risks that rely heavily on the nuances of, as I said, buildings, structures in commercial properties. Forensic accountants, not just in investigating claims for criminals, also looking for fraud claims in insurance companies. Most often, they can be seen if there's a suspicious loss that doesn't appear to be well documented. They also can help track down which policy was in effect at the time a claim was made. If you think about in the environmental insurance world, where a building might have been put on a property that was contaminated by asbestos or an oil spill at some point, but it isn't discovered till 10 years later. Forensic accountants can go back and track who owned the property at the time and which insurance policy was in effect at the time to make sure that they find the right person to cover the loss. And it's got to be better than doing tax returns, I think. One of the most fun jobs, that's the right description, is fraud examiners. The downside is you become a little cynical, but you're there to help protect both the policyholder and the carrier. Why the policyholder? Because the more fraud that's perpetrated on a carrier, the more likely rates across the board go up to compensate for those losses. And we've all heard about fraud often in the bodily injury or workers' comp arena. Somebody's out on workers' comp or is in a car accident, claims to have a back injury. The fraud examiner looks at the medical records, may discover that there was a pre-existing injury and it wasn't from the car accident, or the injury isn't so bad that the person can't play 3 sets of tennis. It's an interesting thing to do, and if you have an investigative bent, it's an interesting job. I'm a former lawyer, so I can say that one of the interesting things, if you are a lawyer and looking to do something else, is to go in-house, and in this case, in-house in an insurance company, because you're again involved in cutting-edge technology, cutting-edge inventions, and keeping people safe. Insurance companies really are there to help, and despite all the reputation of being an obstructionist lawyer, the lawyer can have a role in crafting insurance policies and coverage to deal with emerging risks in such a way that coverage is provided, but the carrier is taking a realistic risk, not looking at a huge potential loss. They also manage litigation, deciding which cases they're going to keep in-house, which ones they're going to settle, which ones they're going to send to an outside law firm. And in many cases, then they manage that relationship with the outside law firm. And they still do all the things that in-house counsel does in any other organization, which might be human resources, negotiating contracts for buildings, managing property, leasing, the varied things that general counsel and corporate counsel do. And a lot more work-life balance than law firms. Insurance technology professionals, apart from the cybersecurity piece, are the ones who help assess the value of some of the new technology out there. For example, autonomous cars. They're the ones who came up with telematics for your car to help assess how much you use your personal vehicle, what kind of driver you are, how they can better underwrite the risk. Telematics is the little gadget that Flo from Progressive wants you to put on your car, so it sends messages back about whether you were speeding and ran that red light or not. Some people like having them with teenage drivers because it allows mom and dad better control and a better understanding of how their teenager is driving. But InsurTech is also the discipline that enables insurance companies and related businesses to work smarter, not harder. So developing the technology to manage claims more efficiently, to process insurance applications more efficiently, to provide underwriting with contracts that have certain commonalities to be able to pull that stuff out. It's also now significant in developing the underlying code for artificial intelligence or machine learning. It's a varied and fascinating place and an opportunity to be cutting edge. Litigation managers, different from the corporate counsel, don't necessarily have to be a lawyer. But if you think about the ads you see on TV for asbestos litigation or formerly smoking tobacco litigation, somebody needs to be the project manager to keep all the pieces, keep track of all the pieces and keep the puzzle pieces together. So when a claim is filed and the case may go to litigation or a lawsuit is filed, somebody's got to track it, and the more cases you get, the bigger the volume. Think of a major carrier with 100,000 customers, and if even 1% of those customers has active lawsuits at any one time, somebody's got to figure out where all the pieces are. Again, not necessarily an attorney, but it helps. But litigation managers also work with IT professionals to develop databases and records and reports of the cases, which ones they've won, which ones they've lost, which law firms they like to work with in different jurisdictions. Also well paid. Producer is the insurance industry's word for a sales representative. The producer is the one who will negotiate with you, take your application, negotiate on your behalf with the underwriting team to make sure you have the best coverage available, to price it accurately, and make sure that when you add a line of business or you get another car or you buy another house, to ensure that you have the correct coverage. Some cases the line's blurred. Why is a producer not an agent? Well, producers are sometimes agents and agents are sometimes producers, but depending on the particular organization, you may be called one or the other. And within brokerages, usually the term producer is used more often. Restoration professionals, kind of the cleanup crew, but a very valuable piece of the insurance ecosystem. If you think about the hurricanes or the wildfires, or even just a fire in your house, or flooding when your washing machine hoses let go, somebody has to come in and help you clean up the mess and figure out what your economic loss was, as well as what your insured loss was. That's where the restoration professionals can help. They can come in and clean up 6 inches of water in your basement a lot faster than you can, even with a wet vac. They can help you determine whether you have a potential mold problem from all that water, and they have special tools to remediate that. If you happen to have a situation where, for example, there was someone ill in the house or a death in the family, they can come in and remediate. You had a chemical spill, they can come in and remediate. Several restoration companies are OSHA certified to deal with biohazards. But the biggest value is usually they're local, and they can help the claims adjuster figure out just what it cost to put you back to some semblance of normal after you've had a disaster. As a result of several years with no major disasters, insurance companies were having difficulty justifying rate increases. And they quickly realized that their biggest value was not just selling insurance, but actually becoming risk consultants, especially to their large commercial accounts. So this has now become, for most large insurance companies, a dedicated line of business, if you will, so that the risk consultant may sit within a product line, such as commercial auto, but more likely partners with a client executive, meets with a commercial client, and tries to assess all of the risks that could be facing your business. For example, if you're a clothing manufacturer located in Indianapolis, you may be getting supplies from overseas. You may have labor issues overseas. You have distribution in the U.S. Where do you ship your products to? How many stores are you dealing with? Do you have a warehouse? How many employees do you have? What kinds of risks are you facing? If your production line is automated, are you at risk for cyber, for being hacked, or just power failures, business interruption, supply chain interruption? If you're in a location that's likely to flood, you have a hurricane, you have a tornado, something that causes the local government to stop you from getting to your business, even though your business wasn't damaged, do you have the right kind of coverage? So that's what the risk consultants and risk professionals do. There are colleges and universities with risk and insurance programs, but it's also engineers are risk consultants. One of the carrier execs I met with said that when he's insuring real property, one of the professions that he looks for to recruit from is mortgage brokers and real estate agents, because they understand how to value property. They're a great asset in managing risk and assessing loss. And then last but not least in this group is the underwriter, whose job it is to collect all of the pieces from the producers, the applications from the producers, the data from the data scientists, information from risk modelers, to figure out how to price the risk and whether the risk is something that the carrier wants to take on in the first place. One of the hot buttons right now in the insurance industry, as you probably can guess, is insuring gun manufacturers. Somebody's going to. How about insuring Boeing with its airplanes that the FAA says are unsafe to fly in? So the underwriter's job is a difficult one in trying to calculate what's a good gamble for the company. Underwriters are also being pulled into the process, to the sales process, more than they ever have before. So that particularly in a commercial transaction, when the producer or the broker is going to talk to the client and learning about the client's business, the underwriter comes along so that everybody who's going to have a hand in writing that particular policy is part of the conversation to begin with. So that brings me to the end of the quick overview of just a few of the varying jobs and opportunities that you can find within insurance carriers. Cindy?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Rosalie. I think maybe some of the people on the phone have the same thoughts I was having, which is I've made a serious vocational error. There looks like so many great jobs too for someone who's pretty new to the industry to jump into. I always think that, if I was starting over, claims adjuster would be a really fun job because you get to travel and you get to, be right in there up to your elbows with, especially catastrophe claims adjusting. I don't know, that's probably one of the more exciting jobs in the insurance field if I had to do it all over. I don't know. Looks like we have one question in the chat for you that's, and I can't really see it. Mary, oh wait, let me pull it over. Here we go. What are insurers doing to recruit talent these days? I truly lucked into this industry 30 years ago because of a friend. What are the most critical skill sets that insurers find are lacking in their recruits, although it varies by position? So that's from Randall Rosenkrantz. And I'm hoping, Rosalie, you can see the chat so you can see the question.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The skill set that insurers are looking for is the traditional liberal arts skill set, if you will. It's important to be able to communicate effectively, and a downside of technology where everybody's got a cell phone or a smartphone, and depending on your age, you communicate via text and you communicate in emojis and you communicate in cryptic abbreviations. But that doesn't work when you have to write a letter to the policyholder explaining a decision on why you are or are not underwriting their risk, why you are or are not denying their claim. The other thing they're finding is that the more we focus on electronic media to communicate, the less we can have a one-to-one conversation. And the insurance business, like most, is about relationships, is about the personal interaction, which is again why my carrier executive friend says wait staff, customer service staff, people on the front lines who are required as part of their jobs to interact with the public have the most valuable skill set because they can't just rely on electronics to do their jobs. They really have to talk to you. Unless you're in a restaurant I was in recently where everybody did everything on an iPad, which was awful. But those kinds of, can you write a coherent English sentence? You'd be amazed. How well do you interact with people? How well, the technology can be taught. Those other interpersonal skills take a lot of work. And one of my recent columns was about networking. And I think we, more experienced professionals, owe it to the younger recruits to take them around and go to networking events and partly talk up the insurance industry as an exciting place to be, because at the end of the day, we're here about helping people. That's our role. But people don't know enough about us. And when we do have younger professionals with us, we need to take them to the trade associations, to the local Chamber of Commerce meeting, to introduce them to people, to help them get comfortable in taking that next step. And in terms of recruiting, I will give the insurance industry credit for looking outside of traditional just going to college fairs. They're looking at the military. If you want to manage logistics, somebody who's been moving supplies between the US and Afghanistan, that's the person. You're looking for leadership skills, the military has taught them that. Looking at people with disabilities, depending on what the particular level of disability is. With technology, somebody who's in a wheelchair can answer a phone and talk on the phone and do data entry just as well as anybody else. So it's thinking outside the box, it's looking outside the box and telling the story of who the insurance industry is and why it's a positive. Most people's view is they're the bad guys who turn me down when I have a claim. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, or like insurance people tend to look at it as a necessary evil. You know, you
Right.
have to have auto insurance, and also, you know, that's who you go do battle with when you have a claim. And I would go back and agree with you a lot on the employment of people with different abilities. I was just at a conference a month ago, and I cannot even believe how many efforts are being made by insurance companies in the area of diversity and inclusion. I think that they're probably one of the leading industries in you know, making changes in terms of recruiting for diversity and inclusion. So I think that's actually something that our industry has to be proud of. So we have a couple, boy, the questions are flying in, but we have a couple more. So I would say if you can address what is the best way to become an expert in a particular aspect of insurance. Do you have any ideas on that?
Read, educate yourself, and go after the designations in your particular area, and ask questions. Find somebody who is a subject matter expert and ask for them to share their knowledge. One of the issues in the insurance industry, as with every other industry, not just us, is the baby boomers are moving on and they're taking their institutional knowledge with them. And unless somebody takes the time and effort to say, hey, you're an expert on insuring farms, crop insurance. I grew up in Kansas. I think farms are important. What do I need to know? How can I learn from you? There are a host of webinars out there for free, podcasts. Most of the webinars, if you can't attend them live, are on demand a little bit later. There are industry conferences to ask about attending. One of the downsides of the cutbacks in every industry is that training has kind of fallen by the wayside. One of the few carriers that's really working on training is Zurich, North America, has an apprenticeship program where new employees rotate among several departments for the first 2 years. And then you choose which one you think is the best fit for you, which I think is a brilliant way to do things. But
Absolutely.
that's a great way to educate yourself. And the more you learn about a particular area so that you can be the subject matter expert that people go to within your department, I think that's a good way to go. For example, if you have a small company that hasn't currently looked at insuring drones, for example, or isn't paying attention to emerging risk, that's learn everything you can and just keep your eyes open. One of the things we do here in terms of sources for stories is, what do we see in the world around us? What are we reading in the news? The inspiration for a story on how to get snow off the roof and what to do with frozen gutters and icicles and deep freeze was good work. After a blizzard, looked up and saw the icicles hanging from his gutters and said, oh, wow, that's a potential liability if it falls and hits somebody on the head. It's leaking pipes. It's a host of potential liabilities. Now, the downside is you scare all your neighbors and friends because you start to look at, like, oh, that fun trampoline in the backyard. Oh, my God, my kid could, you know.
See hazards everywhere. Yeah, that's for us compliance nerds and the people who are risk managers at heart. Gosh, I hate to cut this short. We still have a couple of questions, but we're running up against our time. There is a question about, if you're more introverted, what's a way to become a better conversationalist? I was going to suggest there's some really good TED Talks on that, and I think the best one is maybe Terry Gross from Fresh Air, who did a great TED Talk on how to talk to anybody. So I would encourage that anonymous attendee who asked that question to look up. I think there's all kinds of resources available for people who are introverts. There's also the book Quiet, The Power of Introverts. So you should never feel bad about being an introvert, and instead embrace the strengths that come along with being an introvert. So that book is excellent, Quiet. So let's see, what else?
Cindy, I would just add that one way for introverts to practice having a conversation is to either start on the phone, where you don't have to see somebody, and you can still have a conversation and catch the nuances in the tones in their voice, or some FaceTime one-on-one practicing with friends with whom you feel comfortable.
Great idea. So, and then the last question has to do with insurance companies hiring people whose job it is to ensure that agents are compliant with licensing and appointment. And of course, there are those positions at insurance companies, usually called the licensing director. And that's actually who shows up at our conference and who's members of our society. So we're the Securities and Insurance Licensing Association and the Securities and Insurance Licensing Association Foundation. The foundation is actually behind this webinar. Our mission is to reach out to the public and increase the knowledge of the insurance industry in the world. But in answer to that question, absolutely, there are insurance companies, I would say just about every insurance company, that needs to keep track of the producers who are contracted with them to write policies, make sure they're licensed, make sure they're trained, make sure they complete their continuing ad, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little bit of a weird arrangement for independent when it's an independent arrangement, but there's still, that is in the contract, that you have to be licensed. You have to have a current, in good standing license. So anything you want to add to that, Rosalie?
You also look at trade associations who help, in some cases, smooth the way on that, and the state departments of insurance.
Yep.
They have somebody on the other side who's monitoring what the producers and the agents are doing in their state.
Love it. Well, we are at the end of our time. What a wonderful presentation you gave us. Thank you so much. I think we can look forward to all kinds of new people entering our industry, and that's exactly what we need. And thanks again, Rosalie, for sharing all of your expertise with us.
You're welcome.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.